Welcome to Alternate Ending, where we're discovering good movies, one bad movie at a time. I'm your host, Tim Brayton. We have a special episode for you this month, falling outside of our usual every Tuesday cadence, because we have a special event to celebrate, which is that one of our own, Gavin McDowell, who you probably know best as the author of the monthly Sects, Lies, and Videotape column on the website, has recently published a new book. That book is titled The Rewritten Bible in Late Antiquity, which fits right in with the subject of Sects, Lies, and Videotape. I'm going to let Gavin in a moment introduce that book and sort of what it's about and how it ties into the work he does on this website. But I just kind of wanted to mention before we get going in the episode that because we have this book and we want to celebrate it, we want to congratulate Gavin, give him an opportunity to tell us a little bit about his broader research project, we decided to do this special one-off episode just to share that information with all of you. So Gavin is going to be joining me here for a conversation about movies based on stories from the Old Testament of the Christian Bible. Obviously, it's not the Old Testament of the Jewish Bible, it's the only Testament of the Jewish Bible. But basically, we're here to talk about movies that relate to Gavin's research, a subject near and dear to the hearts of some of us. Certainly, I find it just endlessly fascinating to look at these movies and talk about them. So that's where we're going to be spending some time with all of you. So thank you for listening. But I'd like to hand things off to Gavin. Welcome to the podcast, Gavin. It's been a while since I've chatted with you, it feels like.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've been on. I guess I don't know why. Not too interested in joining a podcast about the releases of January or February, I guess. I'll be back to complain about. I'll be shortly complaining about the movies from last year with Brennan.
Excellent.
So I haven't got anywhere, and of course I'm 40 columns deep into Sex, Lies, and Videotape right now, with 41 coming out later this week as of the time of recording, or possibly last week by the time you listen to it, or maybe later today. I don't know. I'm not sure when this is coming out.
Yeah, we haven't pinned down a release date yet, but it'll be around now. There either is or is about to be a new column.
Yes.
So I wanted to go ahead.
Yeah, where should I begin?
Oh, well, I wanted to say, very recently we had a big episode celebrating the 10th anniversary of the podcast, and everybody had an opportunity at that point to kind of share their history with the site. And of course, you weren't part of that podcast because it would have been impossible to schedule with you in Paris and like 8 of us not in Paris. But I wanted to give you a chance to just quickly talk about your history with the site, and I'd say particularly the column, and how like your life got you to that point, and how maybe that starts to get at the book that you've recently published.
That's an interesting story. Well, maybe not, but anyway, it's a story. I mean, when I saw the sign up for the 10th anniversary special, I didn't think about signing up because I don't really associate myself with the podcast on the site. And even though I've been doing this for over 3 years, writing for the site, I tend to think of myself as a newcomer. But then when the episode came out, I felt left out. I was like, why do I feel left out? It is because I've been around for a while. Like many of the people on that podcast from a week or so ago, I was a longtime reader since the Antiquity and Ecstasy days. I had just finished a master's, and I was studying Greek during the summer, like right after I'd gotten married. And I was separated from my wife, and I was feeling bad, and I was reading movie reviews from a critic I used to read religiously, you could say. His name is Stephen Gradanis, who is actually a deacon of the Catholic Church. Currently, he wasn't then, but he wrote on his blog, which is called Decent Films, or his website, a short article called Lines I Wish I Had Written, Hop. And he starts by, it's not often I encounter a line I wish I had written right in the headline of a review, but here's a case in point. Tim Brayton, who blogs at Antiquity and Ecstasy, kicks off his cathartic, though also occasionally obscene, review of Hop with a brilliant headline, Abandon all Hop ye who enter here. And so that was the first time I had stumbled across Tim Brayton's name. And I began reading the Antiquity obsessively and learning all about film films and film genres I really hadn't watched at that point, as I read all the reviews of the Universal horror monster movies. I read about slashers. I don't even like slashers, but I read all of your reviews. I learned I could have learned more Greek that summer, but that's how it began. And the next evolution is when you hopped over to alternate ending. I ignored the podcast. I don't know. I found podcasts to be kind of a terrifying new technology I didn't know what to do with. But then I was in the midst of, I'd actually defended my dissertation already. And during that time, when I was a doctoral student, I made the mistake of organizing a conference and then editing the collected volume from that conference. And even though I was one of 3 editors, I was the only one who was a native English speaker. And the conference volume was going to be in English. And I still resent the other 2 editors to that day, as I wanted to die during this dark period of 2018, 2019. I was living in Canada at the time in a postdoc and editing this terrible volume, which you can download for free. It's called Diversity and Rabbinization. And I started listening to the podcast out of desperation. I needed human company during those dark winter Canadian nights. And then I realized that the podcast was really entertaining, and would listen to episodes, like several episodes a day, and discovered that not all podcasts are as good as the alternate ending one. And it was only at the end of my Canadian exile that I actually approached, I believe it was either Rob or Carrie, maybe Carrie, with the idea of writing for the site, because you guys had occasional special guest columnists. And the initial proposal was about bad French movies.
That's right. I remember that.
French cinema has an international reputation of being kind of opaque and like uppity, elitist, and also good. And most French films are none of those things. They're like bottom-feeding, lowbrow comedy, and we keep them to ourselves because they're very bad. And that was not really a renewable source. You can only deal with so much of it, and most people couldn't even see these films, nor would you want to. But that was something I did after I moved back to Paris. And then I had long wanted to write about religion in film as a way of doing what the French call vulgarization, and Americans call it popularization, and the Germans call it third mission, which sounds like espionage. And that basically means that in addition to teaching and research, you should try to reach out to the plebs and do something that'll entertain them. And it's just like I wanted to share my passion and enthusiasm for especially biblical retellings of biblical stories is a subject of most of my research. But I didn't want to write a column just about Bible movies for reasons that'll become evident by the end of this hour. Like religion and film in general. And I'd already been invited on another podcast, The Goods, hosted by Dan S. and Brian T. Dan is an alternate ending supporter. He's active on the Discord. And we talked about the movie Destiny, Yusuf Shaheen, an Egyptian movie. And Destiny became the first subject of Sects, Lies, and Videotape, which I proposed. So I was not one of the writers that was invited to help participate in keeping alternate ending afloat. I insinuated myself into the writing community and ended up surviving, whereas most of the people most of the original columns didn't survive. Mine did, and ended up just me and Mandy doing our regular things, where she writes about terrible movies and I write about religious movies, about half of which are also terrible. Yeah.
I'd like to, if I could just take a moment to pause you.
Sure.
There. I've communicated this to you privately, but I'd like to say it publicly because I think that the world needs to hear this. There are long stretches in the life of the website where I just feel I cannot write, and so there was a long one of those in 2024 where basically I wasn't producing reviews, period, and then another one in 2025. I'm not unaware of that, and I've said thank you in the past privately, but I'd like to say thank you publicly. There have been a lot of times in the life of the website where your column is like the thing that's keeping the website awake, and I I want to say to the world and everyone that I appreciate very much that you have been doing that for us. So thank you. Because the columns are also great to read. I love them. So
I have, honestly, because there's no way to get feedback if you don't comment or even click the little emotion, like the little emojis at the bottom. It's hard to know if people are actually reading it or if they do read it, if they enjoy it. So thank you. I appreciate hearing that. There weren't too many comments on the past two, and the upcoming one is a obscure film I chose about obscure religions. So I don't expect much commentary on that either. I do appreciate that. But I'd say the column, if I need it, you want me to talk about my book and the research, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like certainly to get you to because what is the book? I mean, like I can guess based on the title, but I'd love to hear more about the research project.
Okay, so my book deals with a rabbinic text, a specific rabbinic text. I'll try not to say the title too often. It's a work called it's called Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, and Pirkei just means the chapters, like the chapters of Rabbi Eliezer, and it is a lengthy retelling of stories from the Hebrew Bible that was written sometime in the 8th century, and it's just a very weird book. And it has lots of the stories contain material that isn't found in the Hebrew Bible, that is reminiscent of other retellings of biblical stories, some of which are quite ancient, some of which are actually from Christian works. And I began, I use the term Rewritten Bible, which has a specific meaning in academia. It's applied a lot to works from the Dead Sea Scrolls. So that's the Dead Sea Scrolls from like the time of Jesus, so like really ancient stuff. And I was trying to move it forward in time, hence Late Antiquity. And Late Antiquity is time between like 250 and 750, like late ancient Rome and the beginning of Islam. And there's also a tradition of rewriting the Bible in the Middle Ages. And frankly, we still have a tradition of rewriting the Bible, mostly in the form of children's Bibles. And, cinema is just another form of doing the same thing. Performing exegesis, like interpretation, by retelling the stories themselves, not by interpreting the text. Using the history as kind of the baseline instead of the text itself. So I'm not here to talk about Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, though. I will bring it up because my favorite Old Testament movie was by someone who clearly read the book. So, okay. And that's why it's my favorite. We'll reserve that for later. My column is about religion in general because biblical movies would be very, very redundant. But I do have a special soft spot for, I called it Old Testament movies because not all of them are from the Hebrew Bible. Some of them are from the Apocrypha, which are not in Hebrew at all and were preserved by Christians. And I wanted to talk about those today. So that's, I don't know if I need to go on about my research. Most of what I do is related in some way, like translation. I did a postdoc on Aramaic translations of the Bible. And of course, translation is another way of interpretation. It's another form of interpretation. In the case of these translations, it would literally add stuff to the biblical text that is not translation at all. And of course, I do a lot of stuff on apocryphal literature, books that are not in the Bible. But I don't want to bore you with the details. I would very much like to get to what I wanted to talk about, which is movies.
Yeah, no, and I certainly would not mind hearing the details, but I feel like that would be testing the patience.
Well, I wrote the book for a reason. If you want to know the details, you can read the book. You could download it for free. The link should be included with the episode notes. Please include the link with the episode notes.
I of course will. Okay. Excellent. So we are here to talk about movies, to talk about the rewritten Bible in terms of how it's been rewritten to form the basis for a dramatic narrative. So movies about the Old Testament. And you've seen a lot. I've seen some. You have a very handy letterbox list that I'll also be putting in the show notes. Basically, here are a bunch of Old Testament movies to take a look at. And I believe at the time of recording, I've seen 12 of the films on that list and a couple of films that aren't on the list. So I would say you're certainly the expert here.
I would not consider myself an expert. Let me explain where the list comes from. Matthew Page wrote a book for the British Film Institute called 100 Bible Movies, and I devoured that book. It's an excellent book. I mean, it's more like a reference book, but it's a great primer on the subject, and he includes like a huge variety of stuff, from silent films that you can't watch even if you want to. Ask Me How I Know, all the way up to he includes Assassin 33 AD. That's the penultimate film. So this guy knows his Bible films, and he includes like masterpieces and he includes trash, and I love that. And I wanted to know, like, I haven't seen that many books or movies about the Bible, and I wanted to beef up for this column. Mm-hmm. What I did is I made a list. I originally made a list of the 100 Bible films. I cloned the list. I eliminated all the New Testament films, and there are 62 New Testament films, most of which, of course, are about the life of Christ. A couple are later. And only 38 about the Old Testament, including the Apocrypha. I eliminated 3 silent films, which only seem to exist in archives, and that left me with only 35. And I have seen 21 of those, and half of those I had not seen a month ago. So I really binged first by taking like the ones that seemed the most important or the most interesting, and then I just ended by watching a bunch of classical Hollywood films, which was a huge mistake. That's as Bible film connotes like a certain idea of like. I guess we'll get into that. We should talk about the historization.
I think we should. Yeah, we should talk about the movies themselves. You know, both me coming from a film historical perspective and you coming from the perspective of these movies specifically as a genre, I suspect we both have ideas and probably even similar ideas of how we would talk about the trend lines in this happening. And the one we discussed before we started recording was kind of a very broadly defined 3-part historization, I think, of there's a silent Bible movie, there's a classical Hollywood or sort of classical period Bible movie, and then there's where we are now. And I think we can use that at least as a framework to start talking. Like based on what you've watched, what do you see as kind of the overall shape of this kind of Old Testament Bible movie?
Well, it's pretty much what you said right there. So we have the silent era where you have Bible films have been with us from the beginning of cinema, and Jesus hogs a lot of the limelight. Mm-hmm. And I think it's one of the questions I had asked you, like in emails, if we can really separate out Old Testament films from New Testament films. And I don't think you really can, because the Old Testament films they're following the same trends. They're following the same trends, and they belong to the same trends as all films about antiquity. So the silent films, whether it's about like ancient Egypt, whether it's about the life of Christ, whether it's about scenes, like the earliest ones are like 10-minute scenes from the Bibles, like the sacrifice of Isaac, or the death of Jephthah's daughter. I don't have time to explain Bible stories that might be obscure to viewers. You could read it in the Bible. Or it's just like the Exodus, but it's like 20 minutes of just it's the special effects stuff. They focus on special effects. And don't tell full narratives. And then, as you mentioned, classical Hollywood. Well, I think that needs the least explanation, but certainly like Ben-Hur, which is that a New Testament film? Is that about antiquity? Like Ben-Hur and Cleopatra and the Ten Commandments are all in the same box. And whatever we're in now, I'm not sure how to characterize the current period, but Gladiator is a culprit. Gladiator and like the Passion of the Christ kind of help shape simultaneously whatever we have now, but there are kind of lulls in these trends, and one of the lulls is between like synchronized sound and the golden age of like Pepla and big Hollywood epics, where you don't have certainly not a lot of Old Testament films, and then like in New Hollywood, Old Testament films are I have trouble even naming them. Like you have Jesus films like Life of Brian and Last Temptation from the 70s and 80s that suggest, more inquisitive or, more like postmodern. You can question religion, you can mock it, but not enough to establish a trend.
I'd like to throw out a couple, I guess, one observation and one argument. The argument would be, and I think I've made this in print before, and just to kind of, before I do that, to reiterate something that you basically just said, the Old Testament movie, I think, broadly follows the lifespan of big costume dramas generally, because the big eras for costume dramas, I would say, or any sort of big, expensive period epics, they're very, very big in the silent era, especially the 20s. And I think that gets maybe specifically kicked off by Intolerance, which is a movie that takes place in lots and lots of periods, but one of them is the period that we're talking about in the Old Testament. And I think that film in the United States and then a handful of films in Italy kind of ignite a trend for like, let's just go big. And so you get all of these movies in the late teens and in the 20s where producers are just spending insane amount of monies on sets the size of like city blocks. So we have a lot of period costume or period epics, and a lot of those become, Old World and then specifically Old Testament epics. And then when sound comes, there's kind of a shift in general towards let's make movies about now, about the sophisticated people living in cities in the 1930s. And then it's really a post-war thing, and I think specifically a post-television thing, when costume dramas come back in the 50s, including at least in one important way, and we're going to talk about the name Cecil B. DeMille, I am sure, one of the people who was there in the silent period. And that's where you get things like the Pepla, as you point out, which is, of course, Italian films that can be about lots of things, certainly not just Bible stories. There's a lot of Greek mythology Pepla. There's a lot of Italian sort of history Pepla. But so in the 50s and then really in the 60s, we have another burst of these expensive, very large, overproduced historical epics. And then that becomes bloated and unsustainable. That's a very famous story, of course, about how the Hollywood industry cannot survive this huge wave of expensive movies. That's how we get the new Hollywood. And then I'd say the next big era of costume dramas hits really in the 90s, which is, I think, a little bit before the Bible dramas come back, which I think you nailed it on the head. I think Gladiator reignites ancient world stories generally, and Passion of the Christ which remains just an enormous hit. I think we kind of overlook how much money that film made. That I think gets us back specifically to like Bible movies and the weird and perhaps slightly broken way that Bible movies have existed in the 21st century, and I'm sure we'll talk about that. But so that's one thing. Is like that's kind of where we're looking at historically. Now, I wanted to quibble slightly with one thing you said. Okay. Which is when you said that Old Testament and New Testament movies kind of feel like they're coming from the same place to you. I believe I've mentioned this in print. I feel like to me the difference has been, and when I think of this, I'm kind of immediately starting with the 1956 Ten Commandments, the 1949 Samson and Delilah, both of which are Cecil B. DeMille films. To me, I think of the big New Testament movies, and then the first place my mind goes is something like Ben-Hur. So I guess I'm basically saying, what is the difference between Ben-Hur and the Ten Commandments? I think the New Testament movies, especially in the 50s, but also I think in the 20s, tend to be a lot more, I guess, starchy. Like they're more sort of about like Jesus was someone we all respect, so we're going to make this very respectful movie about how he's important and serious. And I don't tend to find the movies very fun. And I know that that's maybe a hot take of mine with Ben-Hur. I think Ben-Hur is just the most boring film ever made. I do not like it. It's been my observation that New Testament movies tend to be like for Christian audiences who want to contemplate their faith. And Old Testament movies are the ones that are all about like sex and violence. Well, and I wonder if that's the thing that is maybe just in my head.
Well, there is a reason that I prefer the Hebrew Bible to the New Testament. You've kind of, it's the sex and violence.
I mean, also, yeah, just from like straight up Bible as literature, the Old Testament's just more fun to read. One clarification is that, in terms of the stuff for cinema, is that approximately half the Bible's narrative, which means half of it isn't, which means half of it isn't suitable for cinema. But yeah, the New Testament is the same story 4 times, and about a guy that is probably aloof from both sex and violence. And then the Old Testament is just like, you have entire chapters that are genealogies, but where the genealogies come from, it's a lot of fucking. And I think that is well observed, because the earliest film on my list that I've actually seen is Judith of Bethulia, which is. First of all, it's a book from the Apocrypha. Second of all, it's D.W. Griffiths. I think, according to something I read, it's his first feature film, which surprised me because I know he had been making films before that. It's only 74 minutes long, and I would say it's not, you don't make a film about the Apocrypha in 20th century America out of devotion. And right. It is a sexy film. Like, part of it, I don't know if you know the story of Judith. She's like a widow a sexy widow in a besieged town. And she goes to the enemy general, like she dresses herself up in this movie, like in peacock robe. And she acts like she's going to defect. And the general is very interested in her, and she goes, let's have a party. And they have a party, and he gets drunk, and she cuts off his head, which is like the basis for like 150 different works of art. So you've probably seen that. But I enjoyed this film. I enjoyed it more after she got dressed up in the big peacock gown. It's like kind of one of my friends, actually, David Shepard, has written a book on the Bible and silent cinema, which it's called the Bible on Silent Film, and it has a still from Judith of Bethulia on it. So yeah, that is a sex-soaked film. I have not seen Intolerance, and I didn't watch it because it has very little overlap with the Old Testament. I knew it was there, but yeah, no, it's 3.5 hours or 2.5 hours long, and only a quarter of it takes place in the ancient world.
Yeah, so I gave that a pass like some other day. Griffiths, I feel like he's made another one. He made another Bible film. But then, Cecil B. DeMille, the thing about Cecil B. DeMille is that he made the iconic sound films, but he was already doing it in the silent era. He actually made 20 Commandments, right? Yes, like he did the 10 Commandments in 1923, which I avoided like the plague, because there was this curious trend. He and Michael Curtiz like to film their Bible films with, modern stories to give us some more. I haven't seen, it's like, I don't know if I also heard that 1923 10 Commandments isn't very good. Maybe you can weigh in on that.
I like it well enough. Okay. It does split its attention between the ancient world and the modern world, and I'm sure that's just because he wants to copy Intolerance, because Intolerance does the same thing.
Okay. And I haven't seen any of Michael Curtis's Bible films, because in addition to that, I've also heard that his Noah's Ark was a disaster of it's a 1929 film, so you have this newfangled sound that they try to impose in the film.
I haven't seen any of his Austrian films, so I.
Oh really? I thought you had seen Noah's Ark, because someone was bitching about the sound mix on that, and I can't imagine who else it could have been.
I'm going to cut this part out. I'm almost 100% sure it was Hunter Allen.
That sounds.
He would be the other person who is willing to talk about that kind of stuff. Exactly.
Anyway,
when you emailed me about that, I remembered that conversation. But.
Right. So anyway, when you look at Michael Curtis's biblical epics, you wonder if this guy ever made any good films apart from Casablanca and Robin Hood. That sounds not like something I would want to watch. Like most of the silent films are just lost. I haven't seen many of them.
Right. if I could offer one tiny insight, just as a historical side note that has nothing to do with our topic, but
Okay.
you were surprised that Griffith's first feature came out in 1914, and I just want to point out, like, the concept of there being such a thing as a feature film is basically not there's not like a concept for it before 1912.
Okay.
So that's kind of part of it, is like that distinction between shorts and features just is brand new. So that's why his first feature comes as quote unquote late as that.
I guess it's why it's short, because like he certainly learned to run with longer run times. Like
Oh yeah, no,
after that,
six reels in 1914 is a very indulgent length, and I believe that would translate to 6 reels.
Okay.
So one other thing I'd like to suggest about this period that I don't know that I have a real argument for what it does with Old Testament movies, but I think that it has to do something. The history of certainly American filmmaking splits at World War II for lots and lots of reasons, but I think one of the things that is really true of 20s and 30s Hollywood that is a lot less true after the 30s, it's a very Jewish industry. And like that's a stereotype of the movies, is that they're made by Jewish people, but it was true for a very long time. All the heads of the studios, I think save one. I think one studio was run by a Gentile in the 30s. So it's an industry where a lot of European Jewish immigrants are like involved heavily in the storytelling, virtually all of them trying very hard to disguise their Jewish roots, because there's still a lot of anti-Semitism in the United States. Like there's a desire to not just be perceived as othered in that way. But I do wonder if that translates into an interest in specifically Old Testament movies rather than movies about like the life of Christ. And I don't know that pays out at all, but I think it might explain why the flavor of Old Testament movies changes, is that the industry as a whole becomes, I think, more Gentile as the 20th century kind of rolls on. I don't know. Do you have any feelings about that?
Well, I think like the big directors of the silent era, I think of D.W. Griffiths and Cecil B. DeMille. I don't think either of those are Jewish.
No, the directors are not Jewish. The producers are, though.
Okay, but I have not noticed, like, I mean, there's a huge exegetical tradition of like specifically Jewish motifs and retellings of biblical stories, and I do not notice them. Okay. In the films that I've watched. I notice they stick, like, they're not exactly faithful to the biblical text, but they're remixing the biblical text. They're not trying to introduce things that will make people go, where did that come from? And that's, that's true of, stuff like the Ten Commandments, like the second Ten Commandments, as well. If we can transition into that, as I watched way too many of these classical era biblical movies over the weekend, starting with Samson and Delilah, which I believe the DeMille film. There's a silent era one as well. I believe that's like the first major one, like the trendsetter.
Samson and Delilah, 1949, huge development in the history of the costume drama, because it basically brings them back. Yes,
it was. I was surprised by how much I enjoyed this film. So it doesn't surprise me as a trendsetter. It has, like, it doesn't deviate too much from the story of Samson as told in the Bible. I mean, it makes narrative changes in order to keep it cohesive, making characters related to each other that were not, that are not related in the Bible. It's like Delilah is the sister of Samson's first wife who gets burned up in the Bible, and then it gives you the scenes that you expect to see, and it gives Delilah a little bit more depth. Hedy Lamarr is terrifically sexy in the role. It made me think, like, it was bad that I saw it first, because it made me think maybe my memories of this genre are bad. Maybe they're all this good, and I haven't noticed. Or no, they're not all that good. They're all chasing trends set by this movie, and not everyone is Cecil B. DeMille. It was like, like Ten Commandments. It's kind of it's like an icon, in the sense that it represents like all the other films of this era. Certainly in terms of Old Testament, like Ten Commandments for the Old Testament, Ben-Hur for the New, and I say icon because that doesn't mean the film is good. I have vague childhood memories of the film I don't want to disturb. But I did unironically like Samson and Delilah, and the others were a bit rough going. As I watched The Story of Ruth from 1960, which was a lot more sedate, but it was still okay. And then going in biblical order, I watched David and Bathsheba, which I thought was dreadfully dull. Gregory Peck plays King David, even though normally I get excited when I see Gregory Peck headlining a movie, and I thought he was probably a very bad choice.
I would say David. That Gregory Peck is a great actor, but he is not someone you want to be the headliner of a film that's meant to have a lot of, again, sex and violence. He is not... Given that he's very attractive, he's just devoid of sex. That's the other problem with the film, is that there isn't a lot of sex and violence in it, which I really want the stuff that DeMille brings. He understands that this is circus cinema. As I use that term. I wrote a review early this morning I watched Solomon and Sheba. So I was going in biblical order, right? So I did the judges, and then I did King David, Ruth, right, the ancestor of David, then David himself, and then his son. Solomon and Sheba is a ridiculous film with an oversexed Italian actress in the role of Sheba. I apologize. I don't have her Gina
name
Lola
in front of me.
Brigida.
Thank you. Yes, she is.
I've had this one on my radar for two reasons. One is her, the other is that King Vidor directed it. Yes, he did. And he is also from the silent era, and he also understands it's a circus cinema. Henry King, I believe, did David and Bathsheba, and he does it like... That is very correct. It was like we were making a serious drama, and I thought, this is not what I don't want all of my Bible films to be like the classical era, but I want the ones from the classical era to be like Cecil B. DeMille's Bible films. No, I want them to be in bad taste. I want them to have orgies. I want like a ridiculous looking idol. And I want it to like cloak it all with respectability. Like, this is respectable because it's from the Bible, but it's really a trash film. I completely agree, and I think DeMille is uniquely and specifically good about that, because going back to the Ten Commandments, which is, there's so much movie there, you can't say it's all one thing, but the thing that movie is in my heart through all of the like very serious and very iconic stuff, to me the Ten Commandments is primarily a film about how Anne Baxter is the horniest woman alive, and she's and like so
Nefertiri, she's like Moses' old girlfriend that keeps lusting for him. Okay, exactly. Yes. Completely invented, by the way. Well, the Ten Commandments, I think it's actually based on a novel. Yes. Now that I think about it. Okay, yes. In addition to the Bible. So. But certainly I think in the popular consciousness, the movie is the story. Like, no one reads the novel anymore. But no, and I think that is what you get from Cecil B. DeMille, who was certainly a conservative Christian in his life, but I think understood that he wanted movies to be spectacular, and a good way to make things spectacular is to lean into those kind of prurient elements. He also directed Samson and Delilah, as you mentioned, and I mean, that's 1949 sexy can only be so sexy, but he's still mostly making that. It's pretty sexy. No, it's just like, pretty sexy. Lamar does it through suggestiveness, and just like line deliveries. Trying to write around the Hays Code actually sometimes it enhances the mood. Oh, preaching to the choir. Instead of blunting it. Definitely, that is my very strong belief, that some very sexy things happen under the Hays Code. Not every actress is Hedy Lamarr. Like the Israeli they had playing Ruth, I noticed that it's her only film credit. No, she was in a Menachem Golan film. So those are her two film credits. She was in Ruth. I think her name was like Ilana Eden, which is a pseudonym. She was in Ruth, and then she was in a Golan without Globus. Oh God! And that was the end of her career. But she is too very pretty, but not sexy. In terms of this, I talked about the New Testament films, like following the trends of New Testament films, is that the Old Testament films kind of died at the same moment. I think this era ends with the greatest story ever told. Like, I completely agree. But then a year later, we have John Huston's In the Beginning, which that represents Samson, Delilah, and In the Beginning are like the two, not bookmarks. What would you call it? The
Bookends.
bookends. Excuse me. The bookends
Yes.
for this classical era. And Houston's film is very, very weird, and I'm not sure if it actually belongs. Like it's hard. It feels transitional.
I think part of what's going on there is, as you point out, Greatest Story Ever Told, 1965, really is where this genre just the wheels fall off of it. The Bible in the Beginning was produced by Dino De Laurentiis, and let's spend a tremendous amount of money to chase this trend precisely at the moment that the trend died is a very characteristic Dino De Laurentiis move. So
the Italians more broad. Well, the Italians usually get in on the action sooner than that.
Yeah, but he specifically just has so many wonderful flops in his career because he just had exactly the wrong timing. But I do think that Huston as a director is someone interested in doing things that are edgier and weirder, certainly than any director in the late 50s, early 60s would have been. And I think that does kind of start to move us towards where the Bible film goes, which is into,
Where does it go? Like, where does it go after this? As we do have, like, I don't know how to characterize the 70s or 80s.
I would think of, and this is obviously a New Testament movie, I think of something like Scorsese's Last Temptation of Christ, which is like a 70s art movie about Jesus in a way.
The only, like, okay, the 70s and 80s is really anemic in the book, Matthew Page's book. So, like, of them, after In the Beginning, you have Moses und Aaron, which is an adaptation of the opera.
And that's, very clearly an art film.
And
based on the
King David, which you watched recently,
I just watched,
Richard Gere, which is like a UFO. It feels like I watched that in Sunday school, and I liked it because it covers like everything in the life of David, and he has like Goliath has a really cool sword that reappears later in the film. But everyone tells you Richard Gere. I was like, Gavin, come on, Richard Gere's performance is terrible. And I was like, I don't remember Richard Gere's performance. Probably for the best because you gave it. Anyway, I don't know what that. It's not an art film. But what is it?
It's definitely a prestige film. It's directed by Bruce Beresford, who I don't think has made a film I've loved, but he makes a lot of films that like seem very serious and respectable. Breaker Morant is his. Tender Mercies, Driving Miss Daisy. So it is a Bible film from the director of Tender Mercies. I feel is exactly the way to think about it. Like this kind of post-70s, we still care about space, we still care about characters, we still care about realism. We're just not as good at it. So it does feel like King David to me is what a 70s Bible film would look like if it hadn't been made at the level of like a Scorsese type director,
All right, so continuing in this line, there's Amos Gitai's Esther, which I saw, which is it's definitely an art film, made by an Israeli director, and it is, it's a story of Esther, but it's about Israel-Palestine. Mm-hmm. And it's just like, at the beginning, I don't know if you know the story of Esther, if people know it generally, it's about, the Jews living in exile in the court of Persia, and there's a minister of the king that feels slighted by the Jew Mordecai, and he decides to have all the Jews killed. Little does he know that Esther, the queen, is also a Jew. And so she has a decree reversed, and then the Jews kill all their enemies. So it's like in the beginning of this film, you have Haman, the minister, dressed all in black, and then when Mordecai takes his place, he's dressed exactly like Haman. So there you go. The Jews were the persecuted, and now they're the persecutors. I'm 14, and this is deep. So that's... also, the other thing is there are not a lot of Israeli Bible films. This is the only one I know of off the top of my head.
Oh, interesting.
And then after, before get on our way to the Passion, or I guess I should say the Prince of Egypt, which is like the one everyone knows about. Right, Matthew Page gives The Revenge of Samson, which is an Indonesian film, and Indonesia is like Italy. And that Samson in the title doesn't mean Samson on the screen. Samson is like interchangeable with Hercules or Machiste or any of the other Pepley heroes. Shaheen's The Immigrant, which is definitely an art movie. Egyptian director trying to circumvent Islamic censors by filing the numbers off of the biblical story of Joseph. He fooled no one and got into a lot of trouble for it. And then he made Destiny, which was my my inaugural column was about Destiny. But there actually are a number of Islamic films about biblical figures. It's just that most of them are not made. I mean, not made in Egypt. Most of them are made in Iran, where you're allowed to depict prophets. And I have not seen most of them. I suppose that Iranian cinema is like French cinema, is that they only export the good films. I know Turkey has made a few, and I know I think even Egypt may have made a few. As Egypt kind of seesaws back and forth between being very religious and secular. I have this immense reference work that I actually bought at Patsy Gaumont. They have like a little museum and archival place, and they had an exhibit on Pepla and films about antiquity. And I bought this like enormous reference work called Late Antiquity au Cinéma. I'm showing it to Tim. You can't see it. Extremely thick, covers every film. Or it's a reference work with listing every film about antiquity, and by antiquity I mean like prehistory, the Romans, the Greeks, the Egyptians, both testaments, and fantasy films that take place in a remote past, like Conan the Barbarians, like literally everything. And they list all sorts of like Islamic films, or like films from Arab and Arab, Turkish, and Persian countries. So something that I need to dive into.
Yeah.
Eventually, providing I can find the films, which also lists, subjects that usually aren't adapted to cinema, like the story of Job. There isn't, unless you count A Serious Man, there really isn't a great film about Job.
Right.
As part of the problem is that it's not really a narrative. Anyway, it's it's just until you get to the Prince of Egypt, and the Prince of Egypt doesn't even fall into the periods that we talked about because it's Disney Renaissance adjacent. It's before Gladiator. It wouldn't fall into Gladiator anyway. I mean, the 80s and 90s, you had lots of Bible stories on television, like series that were just retelling the Bible, sometimes animation. There was a series on TNT of Bible films in the 90s. But it's just like... And then after Gladiator, I mean, I feel like there are two separate trends. One is making films that are like Gladiator, or after 2003, like Lord of the Rings,
right, or
like both of them, and then you have like an uptick in evangelical slop.
Yeah, exactly. No, and the uptick in evangelical slop, I think, is very, very much a like in around 2000, you started to have mega churches spending money on film production, and then Passion of the Christ clearly kicks that into overdrive because it proves that there's an audience there.
Like, it's not an Passion is not an evangelical film. It's many things.
It's Catholic as all hell.
Deeply Catholic, and not doesn't fall into a lot of traps that evangelical films tend to do, which is like bombastic sincerity and terrible like special effects that are like way over the top. I think like Mel Gibson is not a subtle filmmaker. I'm sorry, I have to talk about Jesus in a moment. I just I saw a film series called A.D. The Bible Continues, which is a continuation of a series called The Bible, which is in Matthew Page's book. I count it as Old Testament because half of it is Old Testament. But it's like at the Pentecost, they have like CGI fire like swirling around, like not like the whole city of Jerusalem, and like CGI wind, like CGI wind. It's like loud windstorm stuff. Like it looks chintzy as all hell. It looks like something that you could not believe happening. And Mel Gibson, like when the soldier throws his spear into Jesus' side, you have to look to see the blood and the water coming out. It's not like a CGI gush of blood and water coming out both sides simultaneously. Right,
because if there's one thing we know about Mel Gibson is that he's a restrained director when it comes to violence.
Well, he loves his violence, but it's also like, I mean, he's blindingly obvious, but also like he makes it seem like something that could happen, right?
Well, he is interested in movies being good, and the people making the Bible are probably not.
Yeah, the other thing, yes, he is interested in it being good. I mean, passion's divisive, but we're not here to talk about the passion. And it's like, I'm trying to think, what is one, I deliberately avoided a film about Esther. There's a movie called Esther and the King, which is like Esther as a romance story. So that one's not about Israel Palestine, and I didn't want to see that. There's one in Matthew Page's book called Oversold, which is actually about Hosea. Hosea is a prophet who married a prostitute to, like, prove a point about Israel's faithlessness to God, and I covered it in my column. It's a scream. It's terribly acted. It has Hal-worthy lines of dialogue. I just think. But it seems to exist in tandem with, like, I mean, in our modern era, I don't know how many, there haven't been a whole lot of Bible films recently, but in 2014 we got two, neither of which I'd qualify as religious films. They're both in the Gladiator, Lord of the Rings mold. In fact, one of them's a Ridley Scott film, Exodus, Gods and Kings, which is like the last Exodus film anyone needs to watch. Like, Prince for Egypt is more interesting to watch, also shorter. And then Noah is Aronofsky read Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer. So that wins a lot of credit. I don't think you care for Noah, Tim.
I gave it a 2.5-star review in 2014, and I probably think about it at least once every couple of weeks. So yes, I would actually say I've come around on Noah very hard.
Okay, no, I think Noah would be, if it's not my number one, it would be my number two behind Prince of Egypt, Egypt, to clarify, which I think is a masterpiece. I mean, I think the consensus and alternate ending is at very good to good. It's like a film that, like, gave me the shivers when I watched it as how old would I have been, like 12 or 13? And it's hard to say what my number three would be, because, like, there are plenty of Bible films that I think are good, and not a lot that I think are exceptional.
Sure, which I'd say is probably about where I am. But if we could use that as a way to quickly touch on something that I'd be curious about. So, in your mind, what makes a good film of this sort? Like, what are you looking for to say this was a very good, or this was merely an okay version of an Old Testament film story?
I have very particular criteria, because I've been damaged from my job. Is that I like it when a director has consulted extra biblical sources using, like, ancient obscure texts, and they've read the same ones that I've read, and they incorporate references into their work. I do not like it when some Protestant is trying to make a psychologically realistic drama and is sticking only to the text. Like, the Joseph film that DreamWorks did alongside Prince of Egypt, it's not nearly as good, but they include references to the Quranic story of Joseph, and that pushed into positive territory. That alone pushed into positive territory for me. So I don't operate by the same criteria. It helps if the film is good on its own merits. I reviewed for my column a terrible animated film about Esther that depends a lot on the Jewish interpretive tradition, including the Talmud and including the Aramaic translations of the Bible I mentioned. And that's a repulsive film, but I enjoyed watching it because they incorporate extra biblical details into it. So more of that, please. And I really liked Yusuf Shaheen's Immigrant, because it had to avoid being too close to the Bible. So he included a lot of stuff about ancient Egypt. He touches on some of the Islamic themes. In the Joseph story, the Islamic story is much sexier. It focuses more on Joseph's near seduction by Potiphar's wife, which is not called Potiphar. He's not called Potiphar in the Quran, but that's... I don't know. Also, I like stories that adapt the Apocrypha. So I'm very partial to D.W. Griffith's Judith of Bethulia, and yet another film I reviewed for my column it's just called The Old Testament, but it's about the Maccabees. Okay. It's a peplum. It's Italian, using a peplum actor. I can't remember which one. He is a Hercules, a former Hercules, and it has all the vices of a peplum, but it's about a subject near and dear to me. So, positive review.
When I was looking at that list you sent me to decide which of these I was going to try to quickly watch for this episode, the Old Testament was one I knew that I wasn't going to watch in terms of, like, needing background, because it's clearly Italian in all of its glory. That was probably the one I was the most interested in watching, so I will be seeing that one soon.
Right, there are two cuts of it, and I don't remember that. There's not a huge difference between the two.
Fair enough.
I imagine you have. I don't know, Tim. Should we transition to favorites? I mentioned I mentioned all my favorites like just now, like Judith the Bethulia, the Old Testament, Noah, and Prince of Egypt. And I'm very partial to sadomasochism.
Sadomasochism is quite good. Very interesting movie, very weird movie in a lot of ways. But no, I think it's easy to watch because the director has a very ideologically committed belief in no copyright. So it's real easy to find that movie.
The problem is they could still take it down because she uses a lot of copyrighted music in that. If you don't know,
that's also true.
Nina Paley is more famous for Sita Sings the Blues, and I frankly prefer. So, like, if you heard her name, you know her from that. I prefer sadomasochism. It feels more unified. It uses a wider variety of music, and she tries, like, if Sita Sings the Blues, she tries to see her own life as a reflection of Sita's, and I don't buy that. But she is Jewish, and her discussions with her father and sadomasochism I found very touching. And there's also kind of like a snot-nosed approach to the Exodus story, and criticism. Also another anti-Israel film. Yeah. Though this time not from an Israeli, but from a Jewish voice, and that I think it makes it interesting. Her perspective is that Israeli religion replaced like indigenous goddess worship, which I think is historically suspect, but at least it's
it's probably not true, but it's certainly a perspective.
It's a point of view, which not all these films have. Right. So, like, what are your favorites, Tim? What do you look for? Well,
I'm actually gonna co-sign. I think Prince of Egypt is my favorite, just because it's just so good. Like, everything about it works so well. As I probably already tipped my hand. You know, I'm here for like Hollywood spectacle for a lot of these things. So certainly the ones that are horny. And I talked about this. What is the Ten Commandments to me? It's the movie where Anne Baxter wants to touch herself. So like I do want to see that kind of like very sudsy Hollywood style thing going on. But if not that, and I don't know if we're still going to get that here in the 2020s, I think Noah is a film that has set out a very good template for what we could have out of these movies, which is, you know, you're telling me it's drawing on sort of these texts that are somewhat more obscure and more theoretical and theological. That would be something that I'd like to see more of, like familiar stories defamiliarized by kind of drawing on these other scholarly trends.
That's exactly it. That's why I wanted to say in one sentence instead of 30. So, I like defamiliarizing the familiar.
Yeah, so like I would love to see more films like Noah. I would want to rewatch Noah before I called it one of my favorites. So like I said, I think about it all the time. So it feels like it's one of my favorites, even though I haven't revisited it since I gave it a negative review. But I think that is kind of where I want the genre to be, is in that place of like let's not just make a starchy is the word I used earlier, a David and Bathsheba, right? Where we have some not very talented director making a movie that's just about like serious people being serious. No, I want people to have fun with it. I want the Ten Commandments being horny. I want Noah being just this weird psychedelic trip, basically.
It's like it's most treatments of Noah, and I've seen way too many this past month. They treat it like a comedy. John Huston treats it like a comedy. Mm-hmm. And it's a story about the end of the world. Yeah. Like everyone dies. And Aronofsky's Noah is the only one to take that seriously. I think it's perfectly legitimate to make a comic Noah, but like everyone does it that way.
And you know, I think a distinction there, like Aronofsky is a filmmaker whose Judaism strongly influences the stories he's telling and has ever since he made Pi, which is like basically a film adaptation of the Kabbalah. Huston, the Bible in the beginning, that is an avowedly atheistic film. And I think that he's the only one who wanted it to be that way. I'm sure Dino De Laurentiis didn't plan it to be that way, but I think that is how that movie comes to be the place it is. It's made by someone who doesn't take it seriously, which I think is interesting and bracing, but it does kind of make the movie like a bit of a snotty, weird mess.
Well, we need to move on to what are our least favorite Old Testament films. And all of my least favorites have something in common. And that thing, can you guess what it is?
I'm not actually sure that I can. What is it?
They are all animated.
Ah.
So at the bottom of the heap, Prince for Egypt, the Dingo Pictures knockoff of Prince of Egypt is a crime against humanity. For the usual Dingo Pictures reason, I just forced you to watch Joshua and the Promised Land.
Fuck me, that was a weird movie. I am not prepared to call that a least favorite. A worst, maybe, but not a least favorite. It was too weird.
Okay, well, the other one, the one that I actually have at the bottom of the heap, it is the very first Israeli animated film. And it is called, I think on Letterboxd, English title is Joseph the Dreamer. The Hebrew title is Baal HaChalamot, so it's just like the Lord of Dreams. It comes from the Bible. It's stop motion. Mm-hmm. It's a stop motion film by someone who does not have a talent for stop motion. And you can watch it for free on YouTube. It's unwatchable. It's like an hour long, and it is... the Joseph story is one of my favorites in the Bible, and an hour seems like a reasonable time, maybe too little time for it, but I had to watch it at 1.5 speed because I couldn't tolerate it. And I encourage anyone who loves terribly animated films, which is a lot of you freaks listening, to check it out on YouTube. I might just drop that in the comments. Don't put that in the show notes.
Okay. Well, I am certainly interested as someone who makes a professional interest out of bad animation. But yeah, in terms of least favorites, I think I would land on a couple we've already talked about. Like David and Bathsheba is a solidly 2.5 star movie. Like it's not that bad, but it does the worst thing a movie can do, which is it's boring. And I do not tolerate boring movies.
No, those three I just mentioned, they're not... Well, I guess Joseph the Dreamer, I just said it's intolerable, but boring. But at least there's bad animation you can gawk at. Like David and Bathsheba, I mean, that's the usual criticism with the classical ones especially, is that they're too long, and they're boring as shit. Like nothing happens, like lots of declamatory speeches.
But I think the other one I would mention, Noah being... the 2014 Bible film about like where could we go forward that would be interesting and productive, I would say Ridley Scott's Exodus, Gods and Kings is the 2014 Bible film that I do not want to see more of. It's this very smugly secularized version of the story. There's nothing about it that's mystic or visionary or supernatural or religious. It's just this kind of tedious rerun of Gladiator in the Exodus story. I found it to be completely uninspired. It did not give me a new way into the story. It seemed, in fact, to very deliberately be closing off the story. So I think that might be my least favorite. I'm mad at it.
I didn't hate it, but it did do something that pissed me off, is that when Moses encounters God at the burning bush, not a single line of dialogue that they exchange bears any resemblance to what happens in the Bible. Mm-hmm. And like Prince of Egypt does it like pretty much beat for beat. And that seems like the opposite of what I just said. So that shows that you can't please me. If you defamiliarize it too much, I get pissed. And also like the big, like Moses' big sacred item is his staff. And he doesn't have a staff in that movie. He has a sword. And that seems like such a niggling thing to bitch about, but bitch I shall. He needs a staff. He does not have a sword. Okay,
that's sorry. And again, it's because Exodus, Gods and Kings is the first draft of Gladiator 2.
Right. Good Lord. I'm a Gladiator apologist, but Gladiator 2 is...
Gladiator 2 is just...
It should not have happened.
It's just nothing. Real quick, because I know we need to start wrapping up, but I would like to know what are the stories, or is there a story that you would like to see adapted that hasn't been, or you'd like to see adapted well that has only been adapted poorly?
Yes, I have answers to both of those, right? So number one, the Book of Tobit, to my knowledge, also from the Apocrypha, has never been adapted, not by the Italians, not by anyone, and it would make a very nice like horror comedy. I think, if you know the story of Tobit. It's okay, you do know the story of Tobit. So I know, for some reason, Tobit is the only book of the Apocrypha I've read start to finish. Right, so it's like there's a woman who's haunted by a demon who's killed all her lovers, and then along comes Tobit's son Tobias, and he's accompanied, unknown to him, by an angel, and, there's potential there. It's never been done. Even if you do it badly, I'd watch it. The other thing, one thing that has been done and done badly, like the story of Jeremiah, which is not like the book of Jeremiah is a huge mess. Like there's narrative bits in there, and you'd have to reconstitute it to make like a big epic movie out of it. The TNT series I mentioned earlier, they did a Jeremiah film with Patrick Dempsey, and like before he was Patrick Dempsey, and it's not horrible, but it definitely could be better. And you definitely need someone else playing Jeremiah. This is like during the moment where the temple is completely destroyed and the destruction of the kingdom of Judah, and that's like, and they go into exile in Babylon, and that's kind of like, I mean, the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible, is basically the literature from this culture that survived. Just all of it is kind of nostalgia for the ancient kingdoms of Israel and Judah, and so. And also, I regret that Mel Gibson's Maccabees appears to be stuck in perpetual limbo. And
yeah, if we're talking specific movies and not just general adaptations, Mel Gibson's Maccabees movie is something I would love to see.
Well, the Maccabees movie that we do have is based on one Maccabees, and I want one based on two Maccabees, which has like the martyr stories, and is like a lot more supernatural elements and is a lot more melodramatic, which is the one that Mel Gibson wanted to make, and then he had a fight with Esterhaz. They could have been so good together, but no, now we're getting a 2-part Jesus in Limbo movie, which, I mean, I don't know why it needs to be 2 parts, but
right.
I'm sure we'll be talking about that when the time comes. I love the story of the herring of hell, but that's not Old Testament.
No, but I am looking forward to that movie to a degree that is not seemly, frankly. That's cool. Yeah, I'm just gonna answer that question as well because I want to. So I would say I think a Book of Tobit adaptation would be great. I feel like it's weird, given how famous the scene in the Lion's Den is, that no one that I'm aware of has tried to make a film version of Daniel. I don't know if you could. There's not a lot of story there.
I mean, when they make a TV series based on the Bible, there's Daniel episodes. I know there's at least like an evangelical Daniel movie. I noticed that was a lacuna in the classical age, along with the story of Joseph, strangely. And they tried
the story of Joseph for sure.
They tried to make a story of Joseph with Rita Hayworth and who's the guy in the Seventh Voyage of Sinbad? Kerwin Matthews. Kerwin Matthews is going to be Joseph.
Okay.
And he's like a unemotive slab of meat, but I like him. But Rita Hayworth was like a diva on set, and like the movie fell apart.
Okay.
And Yusuf Shaheen was there. He was on set. He was like a consultant, and then he made his like Joseph movie like 40 years later. So anyway,
I would also, specifically in terms of Joseph, I'd love to see, this isn't exactly the same as adapting the story of Joseph from the Bible, but I'd love to see an adaptation of Thomas Mann's Joseph and His Brothers, which is
good luck with that one. That would need to be, that's going to be like a Netflix TV series.
70 hours long.
That is such, the novel is terrific. It was a series of novels. Yeah. Truly epic. We have some Thomas Mann fans among, like, in the Discord. And they probably have not read it. You should. Everyone should read Thomas Mann's Joseph and His Brothers. That is a deep dive. He knows. He's read everything about the Joseph story, and he includes it in like side notes. He talks about Islamic interpretations. He talks about like what was going on in Egyptology at the time. He makes lots of references to the New Testament. The Joseph story is important in Christianity because there are lots of parallels between Joseph and Jesus. I have to stop.
Yeah, no, I will add one thing that you didn't add, which is I love about that book. It takes place in the ancient world, but it's from a perspective of there is a more ancient world still. Like the characters in this novel are like looking at ruins that are 500 and 800 years old and like thinking about the people who were here 500 and 800 years before them. And I just love that sense of like deep history that's kind of informing this and reminding us it's not just like people lived in these times. It's not just like stories on a page. But then the other thing I want to say in terms of we've had an adaptation because I just watched it, but I'll tell you that awful insane cartoon lion thing, Joshua in the Promised Land, did make me feel like there is something real cinematic in the story of Joshua, and I would like it to be done not that way. If you're not sure what Joshua in the Promised Land is, it's this like made by a guy in his garage animated movie about a lion cub who is bodily abducted to the ancient world where he becomes Joshua.
The closest we have, I feel like, is it happened one night with its discourse on the walls of Jericho. It shocks me that Cecil B. DeMille or, King Vidor didn't want to stage the walls of Jericho falling down.
The walls of Jericho feels like a no-brainer set piece.
Well, it has, like, in TV shows, the VeggieTales famously covered that.
Sure.
So don't worry, VeggieTales has got you covered.
Okay. I want to see a $200 million version of this, is what I'm saying. All right. Well, that'll probably, unfortunately, bring us to the point that we have to wrap up. Thank you so much, Gavin. I love talking about this kind of stuff with you. Hopefully everyone enjoyed listening to it. Before we go, other than the new book, The Rewritten Bible in Late Antiquity, to say the title one more time, do you have any other projects out there in the world that you want to share? Any other places we can find you online?
No, I should have prepared for this. I'd say no. I mean, I'm on Letterboxd. I have my column coming out regularly, once a month. And no. I'm between jobs at the moment, so that's it.
Fair enough. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me for this conversation. Loved hearing about the book. Love hearing about these movies. I, as always, am Tim Brayton. You can find me right here at Alternate Ending. You can find me on Letterboxd. Thank you for listening to this special episode. We are going to be coming back at our regularly scheduled time on Tuesday, so we'll catch you all then.